Hi. So this is the last lecture on semantic change. So the last kind of installment of this introduction to semantic change. And I'm going to be doing something similar to what I did in the previous lecture. I'm going to be looking at some etymological information and some word histories, in other words, and doing a kind of semantic analysis. And this will be sort of a demonstration, an example of the kind of thing that you'll be doing when you write your little essay later on. So again, it's supposed to give you some ideas and patterns and ways of thinking about things for when you pick a word and give a report on it. Now, in the previous lecture, I used information from the American Heritage Dictionary online, so that's just a standard, normal kind of dictionary. And I also used information from the online etymological dictionary. And those are both sources that you should use when you're investigating a word. But now for this lecture, I'm using a different source, a very special dictionary. It's called the Oxford English Dictionary, the OED. And it's just possibly the greatest dictionary of all time anywhere. There's a chapter on the Oxford English Dictionary in the Bryson book. So this is the first reading that you should do from Bryson. Make sure that you read through that. And it's going to give you an introduction to how this work came about and what it does. But basically, the aim of this dictionary is to record every single word used in English since 1150, to trace all the different changes in meaning. So it gives all the different ways in which a word has been used throughout the centuries, and also to give examples to illustrate these different uses. So, and this is a resource that you're going to use also. There is a version of it online. If you connect to Scotty, to the UCR library, then you will be able to access this resource online, and you'll be able to look up words and then study the entries on these words. So this is one thing that you should definitely consult when you are investigating your word later on. And what I've done now, there's an outline to go together with this lecture that it says a little bit about the OED, first of all. And then it has some information from the entries on two different words in the Oxford English Dictionary. And these are the two words that I'm going to look at. Now, I didn't put all the information. Often the entry for a word will be very long and have lots of different examples and lots of different meanings. So I've just picked out some specific information that is going to be useful in trying to understand the history of these two words. The first word is the word complexion. And so again, if you're looking at the handout, you'll see more details of what I'm talking about here. So first of all, with the word complexion, just think about, and this is something to do when you've got your word, think about, okay, what is the core meaning of this word from our perspective? What is the first thing you think of? What does complexion mean? To me, in any case, complexion would mean the color or the quality of someone's skin, right? Someone has a nice complexion, and especially the face, right? The face is especially where you see the complexion of someone. But now if you look at the original meaning of this word, if you look at the etymology of it in the information from the Oxford English Dictionary, there you will find that complexion originally had a very different meaning. Complexion is made up out of two Latin elements. Latin com, meaning together, and plectera, to plait or to twine. And by plait or twining, we mean kind of weaving together, braiding or weaving things together. So notice that the source, notice that this word comes from a source that is weaving, right? The original domain or area that this word comes from is the activity of weaving things, plaiting or twining. So how can a word that has to do with weaving things together, how can that now refer to the quality or look of someone's face or skin, right? So this is an example of a word. This is a good example of a kind of word that's obviously gone through some kind of semantic shifting that is a nice one to analyze. And so that's what I've done then in the rest of these slides, again, using the information from the Oxford English Dictionary. So if we look at the development in the Oxford English Dictionary, it starts, the first meaning that they give is the oldest one. So that's not necessarily the meaning that we use today. It's the oldest one. And notice that actually with the first meaning where it says 1A, there's a dagger next to it. And that dagger means that this meaning is obsolete. We don't use this meaning anymore. However, looking at this meaning is going to help us understand how this word has shifted in its usage. So we're examining the usage of the word. And if we look then at that first oldest meaning, in the Middle Ages, we see that complexion referred to the combination or the blending or even weaving together of elements in the body or humors in the body, different substances in the body. So in other words, your complexion referred to kind of the combination of things that your internal physical constitution. Now, so notice what's happened here. This is already a metaphor, right? Because what we're doing in the Middle Ages, what they're doing is they're taking the idea of weaving and they're taking a language or a term from that and they're transferring it and they're applying it to these kind of natural elements that get blended together. Obviously, they don't get literally woven together, but it's a way of trying to explain how things get combined into a kind of unified thing, because that's what weaving does, right? It combines strands or threads into a unified thing. Okay, so that's the original meaning of complexion. Now later, notice it tells you, this is under 4A under complexion. Later, complexion came to refer to the natural color and appearance of the skin, and especially of the face. And it explains this originally as showing the temperament or bodily constitution. So what this is saying is that complexion came to refer to your skin because it was thought that, well, your skin looked a certain way because your internal constitution was mixed in a certain way, right? If you had a nice blending, proper, appropriate, good blending of elements in you, then you would have, your skin would look healthy. And right, and we even think in these terms today that the healthy looking skin is going to indicate it generally a healthy person, or with animals, a healthy fur coat is something that indicates internal health as well, right? So we see some kind of connection between these two. So notice what happened here. This is a metonymy, right? Because it was believed that there was an actual connection between the internal constitution and the outer appearance of the skin. So, and the name then jumped, it shifted from these internal constitution that it originally had to, and was then used to refer to this external appearance of the skin. Okay, so this is an example of metonymy. Now, finally, in any case, this basically gives us our answer then, doesn't it? It gives us our answer to why complexion, though it had a very different original literal meaning, can now refer to the appearance of the skin. Now, I just want to point out that the Oxford English Dictionary also tells us that, this is under number 7, that complexion can be used figuratively as well. That FIG there means figuratively, and it's basically the same as metaphorically, right? Because when, again, using a metaphor means speaking figuratively. And so it's telling us that figuratively, the word could also be used of any kind of scene or situation and could describe kind of how things look. So in a phrase, something like the complexion of the situation changed dramatically. So notice what's happening here. When we use the word complexion in this way, we're thinking of the meaning, the appearance of the skin, of the face, and we're taking that idea of the appearance of the face and we're transferring the word for it to something else, right? To say the events or society or the historical period, things like that. And we're using the word complexion to apply to that. So we're using a metaphor again. So notice what's happened with this word. Originally, complexion, when you talk about the complexion of someone's face, you're already using a metaphor, right? That occurred because of a metaphor, because that word was transferred from a different idea of weaving. And now we're taking that, the word that refers to the face, complexion, and we're transferring it again and creating another metaphor. So there's a chain of metaphorical transfers that has occurred with this word. Okay, so that's the word complexion. And again, what I'm trying to do is just give you an example of how we can look at information from etymologies and also just thinking about how we use the word and give a kind of coherent and logical explanation of how its meanings have developed and how its different meanings are connected to each other. And then secondly, the second word that I have for you here is the word temperament. And again, I have details from the Oxford English Dictionary that are on the lecture outline. And if you look at this, originally, temperament basically meant the same thing as complexion, that it meant a kind of mixture of physical elements in something, right? So it's almost the same definition. The original definition for temperament is almost the same as the original definition of complexion. And so now again, let's think about, okay, what does temperament mean to us? What's the core meaning of temperament? Well, to me, a temperament refers to a psychological disposition. That is, you can have an irritable or amiable or sour temperament, right? It kind of just refers to whether you're good or bad natured, that kind of thing, right? So again, we can ask the question, how did this shift in meaning occur? And when we look at the entry from the Oxford English Dictionary, we'll see that, in fact, it was a very similar shift to what we saw with complexion. If you look at this statement here, this is let's look at number 6, for example. It says that in medieval philosophy, the combination of the 4 humors of the body, by the relative proportion of which the physical and mental constitution were held to be determined, right? So the point here is that it was believed that not only was your skin color, but also your psychological disposition was thought to be caused by your particular blending of bodily elements. So there was a connection, there was an actual physical connection between your psychology and how the different elements inside of you, these elements, substances, things called humors, how they were mixed up. That's what your temperament depended on. So for example, someone would have an irritable temperament because they had an excess of some kind of bile in the body, and this would cause them to be irritable. So that's very similar to this metonymic connection between complexion as the internal constitution and the external appearance of your face. So again, that basically gives us our answer, doesn't it? It gives our answer to how could temperament come to refer to psychological disposition? It's from a kind of metonymy. And then again, if you look at number 7, the very last entry under temperament, it really specifies kind of our meaning of temperament and relates it to the original meaning, the constitution or habit of mind, especially as depending upon or connected with the physical constitution or natural disposition. So again, this is an example of a word that originally had a very different kind of core meaning and usage. But there is a kind of a logical story that you can tell, a connected story that you can tell that explains how it has the meaning that it has today. So that's I'm using this approach of the kind of the historical approach of going back to the original and trying to explain step by step where it came from. Of course, the other approach that you can do with these words as well is kind of looking at a variety of uses that we give these words today, and you can find those especially in a standard kind of dictionary. So that's the end of semantic change. If you have any questions about any of the concepts in semantic change, or if you're looking at a word that you think has undergone a change and that you might want to report on, then feel free to ask about that. Okay, bye-bye.